after, we're going to start counseling. So those of you who don't have it in, and both you guys do, but those of you out in video land who don't have your history in, you need to get it in before Wednesday, because we're going to start on Wednesday. So if you're especially if you're in this classroom and you're going to be face-to-face counseling, then you really need a history so that you can start counseling, because it's going to happen next week. I mean, next class period, I'm guessing. I should be able to get through this fairly simply. This is the end. Chapter 15. We're going to show you how to close things down with your client. One of the things that we talk about is that you need to maintain evaluation throughout most of your, I can't even read that. Anyway, it's chapter 15 right at the end. You need to be constantly evaluating as to whether it's working. That's really important. You potentially, and this is something I've talked to other individuals about. There's a difference between an introvert and an extrovert. Extroverts are really outgoing individuals. People like to be around them. But sometimes extroverts are so focused on themselves that they're not focused on anybody else. Yeah, I think I can say that. Okay. I have proposed that introverts make better instructors, make better teachers, because rather than caring about whether their ego is getting out there someplace, they care about their students. And I've talked about that before. I don't get a lot of agreement on it, not even from other psychologists. It's really difficult to stand up here and do what I'm doing. It really is. It's not that easy. You've got to take yourself out of yourself, especially if you're an introvert. And of course, I was talking to Dr. Kine about this, and she was admitting that she's an introvert as well. I'm an introvert. I know I am. If you don't think I am, then try to come over to my Hogan some evening and knock on the door and see if I answer. I mean, I'm that bad sometimes. Anyway, yeah. But counselors are the same way. If you've got an extroverted counselor, I don't know if that's going to work at all, because they care more about themselves than they care about anybody else. And that's one of the problems with the extroverts. So potentially, if you're a good introvert and you're a good counselor, then one of the things you should be doing is trying to figure out whether it's working or not. I mean, that's only logical. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And that's the first thing it says. It needs to be continuous throughout the counseling process, evaluating progress. And of course, we do need to do this. Before first meeting, the practitioner should evaluate whether additional information is needed. This is one of the very first things that you should be thinking about. Do I have the expertise to handle this client? Looking at their history. And usually you will have a history before they make an appointment for counseling. They will have a history. They will provide a history. The history, of course, will be, you'll be able to at least see what the client thinks is their problem. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to determine whether you have the expertise to handle that client. During the exploration stage, practitioners evaluate if they have necessary information about resources that are needed. And you will have basic information about this select individual. So you need to make sure that whatever you need to help this client, you have that available, whatever those resources may happen to be. And of course, we do need to talk about whether you have the expertise to handle this client or not. If it's a client with a specific problem that is very difficult to deal with, if you've never dealt with anybody with this problem before, then probably you need to ask yourself, can I handle this client? Of course, if you're an extrovert, with that kind of an ego, you'll go, you bet I can handle anything. Okay. The practitioner needs to perform ongoing evaluations. Did I skip one? No. Okay. The practitioner needs to perform ongoing evaluation after each session is done to identify how well the clients think he or she is being heard and to determine the strength of the relationship. And this is one of the things that you need to determine. A lot of times you'll lose a client, and it will be because they don't think that anything's happening. And of course, this is something that you have to evaluate at the end of every session as to whether you are helping the client, what's the strength of your relationship. And of course, I do that after every class. I mean, some classes I'm very disappointed in myself. I didn't get my point across. As a matter of fact, in Psych of Law, in the next hour, this is a really tough chapter to deal with because we're going to start talking about not guilty for reasons of insanity. Real tough concept to get down. And so I'm a little bit worried about the next hour because I have to talk about something that's very, very complex. We'll see if I can get through it. During the exploration phase, the practitioner evaluates whether they fully understand the problem, the situation, the issue, and the issues of the client. And of course, this is a continuous process, yes, ma'am.
Before you change the slide, I think that goes with sessions for clients and then for one-on-one individual session. When the clients are not the clients, but the counselors are not making that effort.
Right, yeah, and of course there is burnout. We can talk about burnout individuals or maybe something new has arisen as far as you're concerned. Right now, what I'm worried about is getting my dogs home for Thanksgiving. I know. Today's the 6th of November. I have to drive my dogs home on the 21st and the 22nd, of course. It's a 2-day trip, but yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough getting my dogs home. So for the next 2 weeks, I may be a really crappy instructor because I've got something else in my mind. My point is, of course, that if you've got something else on your mind, yeah, then potentially you're not giving your all to your client. So that's a reason why you need to evaluate as well, and burnout. So there's always that possibility. Always that possibility. And this is a tough job. And I know I keep talking about myself, but yeah, I've got to drive home and get my dogs home. Monsters. My dog just lost her collar yesterday. I don't know. It's gone. Bullet head. Some other dog pulled it over her head. Now I don't know where it is. So I'm going to have to find another collar. But I have to drive to Albuquerque this weekend, so oh well. I know, don't worry about my dogs. Don't worry. I'll get them home. You guys don't have to worry. I'll figure something out. But I'm also anticipating going home. I was trying to figure out if this is the 12th week or the 13th week. It's really kind of hard to tell since the week after Thanksgiving is the 15th week.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the last week. We have 2 weeks before the Thanksgiving week. So you can call this the 12th week or the 13th week, whatever you want. Those 2 days that we're going to spend just before Thanksgiving, I'm not even going to count as a week since it's only 2 days. Anyway, okay, you guys are going to be counseling in here anyway. Okay, so what are we doing? During the goal setting phase, practitioners monitor the quality of the alliance and baseline assessment of actions, and of course, depending on how good your history is. And I've actually given you 2 histories. The first one I gave you was a paper and pencil history, and it was a little bit more extensive than the second history I gave you. The second history was online, and the reason I gave you that was because it was online, and at that point I wasn't thinking, well, I can just turn it into a PDF. But now that I've figured this out, technology is not my friend, not always my friend, sometimes it's my enemy. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to figure out how to put all this on Blackboard so you guys have access to everybody's history. But I'll figure it out. I'm going to do that this afternoon. I figure that Curtis already knows, and maybe he'll tell me what I need to do in order to do that. You do know, don't you? How to put it on Blackboard, so that well, anyway, okay, so we'll figure that out as well. So the question is, how much information do you have, and is it adequate? That's a huge question. The second history is only 4 pages. The first history was, I don't know, 8 or 9 pages. So maybe the first history was better than the second history. So are we actually getting enough information is another question that we have to ask ourselves. And of course, your first counseling session, you're going to be filling out that history. You're not filling it out, but right now it's just a skeleton. So what you're going to be asking them questions and trying to fill up the scaffolding that you've already created. During the action phase, practitioner and client develop a plan for goal achievement that is a blueprint to evaluate progress. And of course, this is one of the things you're going to be thinking about. How in the world are we going to help? How can I help you? What is it that I need to do in order to help you? And of course, it has to be collaborative. It has to be between the two of you. In the old days, and I talked about this before, in the old days back in the 70s, when I was trained to be a counselor, they didn't train us to be collaborative. They trained us to have all the answers. That was the idea to me. Well, this has all changed, and it all changed in the 90s. In the 70s, of course, you were directed. You're always trying to fix the other person. And I talk about fixing people all the time. The reality is people can only fix themselves. I wish cars were that way, but they're not. You got to figure out what the problem is, unfortunately, and you got to figure out what the problem is with your client. You also have to figure out if the problem that they're complaining about is the actual problem that they have, or is there something else that's leading up to this? If we don't go to the source problem, then of course we're never going to get get them to a point where they're completely they're doing much better. After each meeting, the practitioner should consider whether the work is leading to the achievement of the identified goals. If the skills being used aren't helpful, the practitioner needs to adjust the technique, of course. Sometimes it is a push and shove situation. The reason it's a push and shove situation is because the client really doesn't want to be fixed. I keep using alcoholism as an example. Alcoholism is a good example, but you're going to find the same type of behavior in a lot of different situations. Sure, they're codependent, but they get something out of it. They get a feeling that they're truly loved by whoever their significant other is, and that's why they're codependent. Do they really want to fix themselves? Well, potentially yes, but potentially no, because if they're not as this dependent on their significant other, potentially they won't feel loved. So this is a problem. There are individuals who grew up in households where violence was a sign of love. So here we're trying to deal with an individual that is being abused, and you're trying to convince them that this is the way things are supposed to be, and they will agree with you. But the reality may be that they don't want that to happen, because if there's no violence in the relationship, then they don't feel the strength of love or whatever. So this is a potential problem that you may be dealing with, and this is something that you have to evaluate. So it's kind of a push and shove situation. You're trying to push them into to helping themselves, and they're shoving back. So this is something you have to evaluate. But this is something that you need to figure out before you get too far in the counseling sessions. Now, normally what's going to happen, the insurance company, whoever that insurance company may happen to be, is going to tell you you have 10 sessions. We'll pay for 10 sessions. That's usually the way they do it. We'll pay for 15 sessions. We'll pay for 3 weeks. We'll pay for 6 months. They will give you a limit as to how long you can counsel this individual. So you're under time constraints right from the very beginning. You certainly can't deal with the client if you're not being paid. That's not something that can happen.
It's unethical for you to do things for free, as strange as that may seem. But it's especially unethical if the whatever organization you're working for isn't getting compensated. So you're going to be under a select time constraint. If progress is being made, it is important to highlight successes and focus on improvement. And usually you should talk about that at the very beginning of your sessions. It's going to give them a positive feeling. If you can give them a positive feeling right in the beginning, then potentially one of the things that you can do is make them feel good about themselves, and that will lead them into more progress, hopefully. Evaluation should emphasize progress to be supportive of the client and gratifying for the practitioner. So you need to show them that things are working. One of the worst types of counselors, let's see if I can say this. One of the worst types of counselors is one that doesn't show any facial expressions. In other words, they're blank all the time. Part of now you have to remember that this is a superior and subordinate situation. You are the superior because you're the practitioner. You have select answers, and they are the subordinate. So it's kind of like a parent and child situation. Now you can, if you've ever been around an adult that didn't show whether they were happy or not, you know that it was difficult to relate to that select individual. Well, if you're the same way, if you don't show the fact that you're really happy that they're doing well, then potentially they're not going to react to you very well. And of course, like I said, it's a parent-child situation. So you need to show them that you appreciate them and that you are happy that they're getting better. So it needs to be gratifying for the practitioner as well. Demonstrating progress through evaluations demonstrates success. Success enhances self-esteem by showing the client that they can succeed. As self-efficacy increases, so does the client's sense of empowerment. And of course, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make them powerful unto themselves, so that they feel like they're doing something, they're getting something done. And that they can continue to get something done in the future. One of the most important times for evaluation occurs during the ending process. One of the things you need to determine is what worked. What worked with this client? You can use that in the future. This is what worked with this client. I have a similar client coming in. Maybe we should try the same techniques. So you need to determine, as far as the client is concerned, what was helpful, what did not work very well, what type of techniques that you used didn't work very well, what was learned, what are additional areas for growth. And of course, there is always more that can be done. It's kind of like education. You never have too much education. You never have enough. So the reality is you have to continue learning throughout your lives. So it's the same way with this. You never should stop growing as far as your mental health is concerned. You should always be monitoring how well you're doing. Scaling questions are an excellent tool to use for evaluating progress. Scaling questions on a scale of 1 to 5. How do you feel about this technique? How do you feel about that technique? What you're trying to do is determine exactly where they are as far as your techniques are concerned. They can be used in your final evaluation with the client on a scale of 1 to 10. How much better do you feel now than you did when you first played in? If the scores are lower, the practitioner might discuss additional work the clients need to do to accelerate their progress. They need to keep going as well, and you need to tell them that. Despite the fact that we have no more sessions, that this is the last session, you need to keep thinking about how to maintain your mental health. The progress that we have made. How are you going to do Any evaluations? Let's review our goal attainment continuum again to see if you believe you've reached the expected outcome. That's kind of involved. I'm not exactly sure I would say quite that. I'm not exactly sure I would talk about continuums to my client. When we began working on reviewing the agency's policies on providing services to elderly clients, we identified several goals. In our next meeting, let's review what we have accomplished in relation to each goal. And of course, that is the one before the end. As you know, our final meeting will be 3 weeks from today, reminding clients when the relationship will end. Before our next meeting, will you think about what has been most helpful to you? And of course, you can talk about this as a collaborative effort once again. I need to know what has worked for you, what made you feel better. I know this is one of the things that you need to talk about as far as your client is concerned. Early on in this project, we established clear goals. I think we should talk together about whether those goals have been achieved and decide if further work is necessary. Is that okay with you? How would you like to counsel there? My goodness, look at that. It's all window. Wow, that's neat. Probably hard to heat though. Of course, it's in the summertime, so we're okay. Sunroom. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being completely satisfied with where you are in relation to this goal that we set, what number would you give yourself? Do you see any problem with this at all?
The room's too small.
Oh, I'm not talking about the picture.
Ow.
I'm talking about what they said. You could say that room was too small, but it's a sunroom, of course. No, I was talking about what she just said. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being completely satisfied with where you are in relation to this goal that we set, what number would you give yourself? See any problem with that? Will that work on everybody? It wouldn't, would it? So if you've got somebody that's trying to ingratiate themselves to you, they're going to go, oh, you're a 10. You're a 10 every time. Okay, great. Is that accurate? Would that be accurate? Well, it all depends on the client. What if your client said, they started out as a 3 and now they're a 4? Is that accurate?
Probably.
Depends.
Improving.
Or maybe they're just a negative person. If you've got a really positive person, and I have this problem, we're trying to hire a couple of people, a third psychologist out into the city. My problem is that I'm so positive that I just want to hire every damn person that comes in the door. And that doesn't work. I give everybody 10s, because I try to be positive. When I hear people talk, I try to be positive. Some people set me on edge, of course. But I'll be okay. Anyway, so the problem with talking about these kinds of scales, how well did I do? You're fishing for compliments in essence. It really all depends on who your client is. If they're really negative, you're going to get a really low score. If they're really positive, like me, you're going to get a really high score. Anyway, we just interviewed 2 people for the Tuba City job, and I gave them exactly the same score. Well, that helps. Oh, man. I remember that when we started working together, you told me that folks in the family yelled at each other at almost every meal. You have come a long way since then. Let's spend a few minutes reviewing what you have accomplished since we began working together. Now, positives and negatives, that's one thing. But of course, here we can look at something concrete. Just this is the way it was before, and this is the way it is now. We don't have to quantify it. We can qualify it. We can make it qualitative, right? And that may be better. That may give us more information than putting a fictitious number on things. An ambiguous number that we're not exactly sure means anything anyway. But this may be better. This may be a better way to do it, to make it qualitative. Everybody was screaming at each other at mealtime. Has anybody ever been around a family like this? Oh yeah, okay. Nobody hears anybody else. Everybody has to yell. The loudest one everybody is the person that everybody listens to, which is probably dad, maybe mom, because her voice is higher pitched. Okay. Yeah, I had a neighbor that was like this. Fun group. So my friend would come and visit. He would come down to eat dinner with us because at least people would hear what he had to say. Because in his family, nobody ever heard him. And there were 6 of us, 6 kids, and he would come down and be the 7th person. But at his house, nobody ever heard what he had to say. He was the littlest one in the family. Kind of an interesting family. Listening to them yell at each other. The evaluation of professional development. Good practitioners are continually involved in evaluation of their work. And of course, that's the only way to improve, is to be realistic about how you do. I've been doing this for a really long time. And like I said, I evaluate every lecture that I do. For a while there, I was watching all my videos, which is kind of painful, but laughing at all my jokes, strangely. I know it was. Christine was complaining, she was listening to me listen to my own videos, and she said, "You laugh at all your own jokes." And she's right, I do. I laugh at all my own jokes. And if I watch this part, I'll be laughing at this part as well. So if you're good at your job or bad at your job, what you need to do is figure out how you did. I've always evaluated all the work that I've done on a continual basis. Whether it was doing this, or whether it was drawing blood, or whether it was working in the laboratory, or cross-matching units of blood, or checking people into the morgue, which is always fun. I was a grave digger for a while. I know. You either get the whole square. The biggest problem is that most shovels are angled. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not. So in order to square it up, you have to kind of dig from this position right here. So you have to go straight down instead of at an angle. All right. Anyway, graves are really important because otherwise you've got to, and nobody fits in one of those things.
You don't freak out?
Freak out?
Mm-hmm.
Freak out? No. Why would I freak out?
I don't know, digging in the ground.
No. I've been digging graves almost all my life. I've had a lot of pets, unfortunately. We know they die. And nobody else is going to bury my cat or my dog or whatever. I know. So I had to dig graves. I've always done graves. No, it doesn't bother me to dig every grave. It evidently bothers you.
For animals. I thought you meant like.
No, humans.
People.
No, I dug graves for humans too. That was later on. That was back in the 80s. When I was a kid, I was like 7 years old and I had to bury my cat. It was run over. And not only that, I had to go get it. It was out on the road. If they're intact, you can just pick them up. But if they're not, you have to get a shovel. Now I don't have anything to dig with because the cat's on the shovel. We won't worry about that. All right, yeah. No, I always evaluate everything that I do. Practitioners may elicit feedback about things they said or did that were helpful or those that were not. And of course, we need to determine that. Sometimes we say stupid things. Sometimes I say stupid things. And usually it's to Curtis. And then he tells me. Or usually, sometimes it's to everybody, and Curtis is the only one that reacts to it. Okay. So I need to know that. And hopefully I will change for the better. I try to anyway. I try to. Clients can be invited following ending of services to complete a written form or on their satisfaction. Evaluations can be reviewed face-to-face or not. Of course, this class will be reviewed
You will all evaluate me in a couple of weeks, I guess. When do evaluations start? Next week? I don't know. Anyway, you guys will have an opportunity to just rip me a new whatever body part, I guess. Just tear me up if you like. Receiving this evaluation information gives the practitioner information for helping future clients. A lot of times I do not read my evaluations. I don't read positive evaluations, I only read negative evaluations. So,
Why is that?
oh, I don't know, I've received a lot of positive evaluations in the past. Which is nice, I think it's nice. Sarah's she's real sensitive to evaluations, so. What am I gonna do? Get young? I don't think that's going to happen. He uses too many words that they used back in the 70s. Yeah, that may be true, but that's where my brain is. It's still back in the 70s, unfortunately. Crazy stuff, crazy stuff. I don't even know what words they're using these days. I picked up the word hookup, so I know what that means. I know. If it has to do with sex, I'll figure it out. Receiving this evaluation information gives the practitioner information to help for helping future clients, and of course that's something that's necessary as well. So you guys need to do the evaluations. I will get an eventual figure as to how many positives I have, how many negatives. Professional relationships in for a number of reasons. Managed care. Actually, I can look at you, I can talk to you, you can talk to me, and I get better evaluations that way than on a scale of 1 to 7, or 1 to 5. Likert scale is 1 to 7. Professional relationships in for a number of reasons. Sometimes the individual goes into managed care. Sometimes insurance companies say it's time to stop. Remember I told you the insurance companies only give you so many sessions that you can go through. Maybe the client ran out of money, or maybe they figured they would rather go on a vacation to the Bahamas than pay you for your services. Maybe you've achieved your goals. Hopefully that's why they're leaving, because you have achieved your goals. And it may be that they're just not moving forward. This happens. There are only certain people that can help a client. And maybe it's not you. A lot of times, the person that is going to help them, this is very Freudian, by the way, the only person that can help them is somebody that treats them like their parents treated them. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a counselor who treats them like their parents, especially if it's a relatively severe problem, and it's a problem that harkens back to their childhood. I know that sounds very Freudian. We don't do Freudian psychology here very much. But the reality is that sometimes that's what the client needs. They need somebody who can be the surrogate for their parent. Maybe their parent is infirm, maybe their parent is no longer around, and they really can't deal with their parents, so now they need somebody else to deal with that problem that arose because of the personality of their parent. So sometimes you're going to be rejected for reasons that don't make any sense to you. You're just as nice to this guy as you were to all your other clients, but this guy doesn't like it. So what's going to happen next? Well, what's going to happen next is they're going to look for a client that treats them the same way that their parent did. Eventually, they may have to go to a psychiatrist. Mainly because psychiatrists don't interact in the same manner that psychologists do. Okay, so if there is a lack of progress, it may not have anything to do with you, it may have to do with them. They want you to act in a select way. Maybe they don't like humor. Maybe their parents never smiled at them and you smile too much. Like down in Oklahoma, if you're the first person to smile, they think that you're weaker than them, and they will tell you that. So, down in Oklahoma, I'm a smiley guy. No matter where I am, I'm always smiling. Well, down in Oklahoma, that was a negative. Yeah, so I couldn't be a counselor down in Oklahoma. I smile too much. Obviously, there's something wrong with me. Here I'm okay. Okay.
So does that mean you quit smiling then?
No. Hell no. No, I just, well, I'd stopped smiling at the Cowboys because the Cowboys thought that it meant something else. As strange as that. When clients leave unexpectedly, it is good to follow up on them. Ask clients about their decision to leave whenever possible, and a lot of times this is the reason why things just didn't fit together right. Obviously, things just didn't fit together right. And that's okay. You don't have to change for your client. Maybe you can't change. Maybe this is the only way that you can do things. Maybe this is the only way that you can counsel. And rather than change, and of course this is a problem that I've seen in colleges, somebody will complain about the way that you teach. So do you change the way that you teach for that one student out of 157? No, I'm not going to change, Curtis, just for you. No, you don't. Of course you don't. I mean, because other people are reacting positively to you, and just because you've got one client, but one student. But I have been at institutions that somebody complained, they told you to change. They wanted you to change right now, just because of one student, and theoretically you had to change. But that's okay. I never changed anyway. I stopped swearing. Okay, that's not that big a change. I don't have to swear. It just feels right to me sometimes. Sorry about that. The practitioner should indicate to the client that the meetings are ending. The client and practitioner may decide to have less frequent meetings before the final ending. Of course, now you're tempering down, of course. Broken heart. Oh, I love these pictures. I don't know where I found them. The client and practitioner need to summarize such things as what has been most important, what changes have been made, what was most difficult, and of course it's the difficulty. A lot of times you may be one of those practitioners that tries to stay away from difficult times. It's a natural thing to do. You try to stay away from things that are painful. That's only logical. There's a commercial on, is it DirecTV or something? Anyway, they're complaining about cable, and they say, keeping cable is like liking to bump your head, or drinking sour milk, or sleeping in poison ivy. Stupid stuff. But I mean, the reality is, as a practitioner, of course, it's that difficulty that you need to pick at. You're not trying to pick a scab open. Well, maybe you are trying to pick a scab open, because until you can open that scab, then there will be no progress. Yeah, and this is one of the things we have to remember. This is one of the things that you have to evaluate. You don't want to be their best friend, because best friends potentially won't want to hurt them, and you need to hurt them in order for them to repair themselves. That sounds horrible, but sometimes that's what it works. Look how tall she is, or how short she is. My goodness, look at that. This is her knee right here. This is the table. My goodness, she must be 7 feet tall. Where did I get that picture? Reviewing and remembering both the good and the difficult times in the process is important. So you need to talk about the difficult times as well as the good times. The reality is, if there's something that really needs to be fixed and it's really severe, then it's going to have to be painful. And so you're going to have to cause the client pain. And that's just the way it works. Sorry about that. You don't want to hurt people, but sometimes you don't have a choice. In the ending process for a professional relationship, the practitioner and client identify what tasks remain to be completed after the relationship has ended. So that's one of the things you need to talk about, where they need to go from here. And there's always some place to go. This is like an educational process, and your education never ends. In the ending process for a professional relationship, the practitioner tells the client that they can return for future meetings if needed. If it was a negative situation and the client has given you a bad evaluation, then probably they're not going to want to come back, potentially. However, a lot of times, once they get out there and they start digging around for somebody else to help them, they may come to the realization that you were the only one that actually dealt with their problem. So they may want to come back, despite the fact that they just ripped you up one side and down the other. The reality may be you're the only one that actually has done anything for them. And they may come to the reality that you were the only one that was willing to deal with their actual problem, rather than just trying to dance around it. So they may want to come back. And as far as that's concerned, you should always be willing to take them back. Unless it was too painful. I mean, they may have gotten you fired. They could have complained about you. You didn't get a raise this year because this one client complained about you. I mean, that's always a possibility. And of course, if that's the situation, if you have that strong feelings about it, then you can't do anything with this client because you're too upset about the whole process that you thought should have worked. It would have worked if they had been willing to delve into the painful feelings, painful ideas, and of course, they rejected you, and therefore you don't have to take them back. You really don't have to take a client back. In the ending process, for a professional relationship, the practitioner invites feedback about the entirety of their work together. And of course, people are trying to see things positively. Hopefully they are anyway, most people are. But like I said, you're going to have some people that are just negative about everything, potentially. We had a shooter over the weekend, I don't know if I hope you didn't see that. Went into a church and just started blasting away. Killed 26 people, killed 8 people from one family, oh my God. I know.
How did that happen?
Just north of San Antonio, Texas. Strange. I wonder what his problem was. He was engaged by a civilian who shot him, and I guess he died from the gunshot wound. He drove about 11 miles down the road and died. Wrecked his car and died. Anyway, the question is, what was his problem? Why in the world was he so upset? Maybe he's just a negative person, and somebody said something negative to him, and he ruminated on that negative thought. Evidently his in-laws went to that church. They weren't there on that select day, so he wasn't trying to shoot somebody specific. If I understand correctly, he started firing before he went into the church. So he started blasting away at the church. And then he went inside and evidently he shot everybody because they said that there was nobody inside that was unscathed. People were running out just covered in blood. So, wow, this is a really strange situation. We need to figure out why this guy went into a Baptist church and started shooting. We need to figure out why the guy just started blasting away at a bunch of country and western concert people. Does he hate country and western music that bad? Is that possible? Wow. It's interesting. Was it racially motivated? Doesn't sound to me like, I don't think it was either. The pastor was Hispanic, I think, but I don't know. 26 is a lot of dead people. It's one of the top 5. I know, but we need to figure this out. We need to figure out what's going on here. All of a sudden we've had, in the last 35 days, we've had 2 of the worst shootings in American history, in U.S. history, modern history. At the end of a professional relationship, the practitioner asks the client if there are any final questions. So, Is there anything you want to talk about? Any one last thing that we need to talk about? Ending professional relationships, saying goodbye. Feelings about ending, we need to talk about that. The long-term relationships, the client and practitioner need to allow time to talk about their feelings. They're going to expect stronger feelings from you than you probably have. I mean, you have professional feelings. You're not going to talk about love because, well, I talk about love in class, I probably should. But I have strong feelings for my students, and potentially you're going to have strong feelings for them. If you do use the word love, you need to make sure that it's agape love, it's filial love, it's a brotherly love, it's certainly not romantic love. My goodness gracious, be real careful of that, hopefully. Some clients feel a sense of loss, sadness, fear, and or anger because they have to leave, because you're kicking them out, because they're done. They want to come back more frequently, of course. So they may feel loss, sadness, fear, and or anger. It's possible that if it is strong enough, they'll come back with a gun. Okay. It's one of the problems with firing people. They feel anger. They feel like you've done something to them. And in essence, you're firing this person, kind of, in an odd sort of way. Clients may feel happy about their achievements and ready to move on. Hopefully that's where they are. This is where you want to leave a client, happy and ready to move in a positive direction. Positive reactions and pride in their work is as common as sadness or anger. But you have to be able to judge this. You have to figure out if they're really feeling that badly about it. Oh, geez. What an odd picture. I know that looks like they're using washing machines.
Oh,
But
yeah.
these are actually portholes on the cyclist. And they're saying goodbye to their girlfriends and spouses. I know, it looks like a washing machine. It's not. Feelings about ending. If the client has limited supportive relationships or is hesitant about their ability to continue on their own, they may express more painful feelings. And of course, in that case, they're making it seem like you're damaging them. Remember, this is a parent-child relationship, and it's almost like the parent is saying, don't come back and don't call me on the phone. So it is actually that kind of a relationship. So you need to be able to deal with those painful feelings. But like I said, you can't just see this client without remuneration. That's unethical, and of course, it's whatever organization you work for deserves to get money for what they do. Ending with groups can bring similar feelings, of course. A lot of times you feel like a family, and for that reason, if you have to stop the group, then people feel anger or sadness. Practitioners may also experience emotions, and hopefully you do experience some emotions as far as losing your clients is concerned. As appropriate, practitioners can share their feelings with their clients, but be careful as to what you say. A lot of times you will say what you think you're saying one thing, and they may be interpreting it another way. Communication has to do with me giving you information and you interpreting what I just said. But of course, there's always a possibility of misinterpreting what you say. I used the word intimate the other day, and somebody misinterpreted it as sex. So I was saying, what happened was I shook hands with a lady, and she shook hands with both hands. I know. Which is, that's one way to do it. Normally, you only do that with people with people you know, showing them a form of intimacy. And I mentioned that, and wow, I know. Are you accusing this person of sexual harassment? No, my goodness, no. I wasn't. I just used the word intimate. And of course, they took, the third definition of intimate. If we look it up in the dictionary, that's like number 3 or 4 down the list. Wow, no, I just meant that they were trying to show affection that wasn't there. And it's a way of dominating people. It's a way of intimidating people by if they're trying to control you through this behavior. That's all I was trying to say. And they, of course, took it as sexual harassment. No. So here I used a word intimate, and of course it was misinterpreted. This can happen with your clients, especially if you're using words. And of course, they want that word to mean one thing, and you mean it to be something totally different, potentially. So this is one of the things you have to be careful of. No, I don't mind digging in the ground. Doesn't bother me at all. Oh man, I used to have a garden, and they would. My neighbor would come and plow it up, and then I had to get a shovel and dig it around. He'd never come and disc it, Dan. I'm sorry. He would never come and disc it. So he's turning over these huge clods of dirt, and I had to get a hoe and just knock them all down. Anyway, we used to turn over all kinds of interesting things in there. No bones though. I'm going to miss seeing you and hearing about your progress. I'm happy that you have achieved your goals. This is saying goodbye to an individual or to a group. I'm going to miss our time together. I feel sad when I think about not seeing you, but I'm glad that you are satisfied with the progress that we have made. Fairly non-committal. I'm going to be sad. How can you misinterpret the word sad? Well, people do. Unfortunately. This will be the last time that I see you. I am glad to have been a part of your journey as you figured out the best way to help your aging father. I hope that nursing home works out well for your father. Yay. And just looking at you, kid. I'm glad that our work together, I'm glad that in our work together, you were able to mend your relationship with your brother. I hope that over time you will become close friends and support each other. Of course, this isn't talking about my emotions or your emotions. It's talking about you and your brother. I can see that you are really excited about the opportunities that your new job is going to provide for you. I'm so glad that you achieved your goal of getting a new job that offers you new opportunities. We're getting there. Oops, okay. Ending with task groups and larger groups, not as easy, of course. Involves the same process as ending with single client relationships. It is important to talk about when work will be completed. Work with the group to develop a thorough summary of what has been accomplished in order to stabilize future changes. So we're getting rid of a group. Here's the group right there. Ending with task, okay, this is a larger group. Make plans for sustaining and building on the group's accomplishments. I just had an ATF meeting. ATF means Arizona Transfer something. Anyway, the I work with the social work group. And so we have a meeting once a year. And it was like 2 weeks ago. Anyway, we always talk about, at the end of the meeting, we always talk about what we're going to do to keep our momentum going. And of course, that's always important. How are we going to keep the momentum going? Of course, I'm trying to not be part of the group anymore because I'm not a social worker for one thing. And they always give me a hard time about being a psychologist. But we need a social worker to do that. And of course, we're trying to hire one. We're out at Shiprock. Develop a system for evaluating the work accomplished and giving feedback. This should all be in place. And we have everybody's email address, and we email back and forth. And evidently, relationships start with this whole process. Nobody emails me, of course, but these guys are emailing back and forth. This time it was an argument between ASU and NAU over numbers. and titles of classes. Oh, it was a lot of fun. We spent 2 hours arguing about titles of classes. Not us, we've only got 4 social work classes, so it's not that big a deal as far as we're concerned. Celebrating successes, the problem is they ignore tribal colleges. I don't know how many are there in the state, 2 or 3, I guess. There's us. I don't know if you could count Pima or not. I don't think Pima's really a tribal college. The Tohono O'odham has one, but they never go to the meeting. Anyway, they like to ignore us, the tribal colleges. Celebrating successes should be included, of course, as far as the group is concerned. We're getting close, we're almost done. Since next week will be our last meeting together, I think we should make a plan for how we will celebrate everything that you have accomplished. Evidently, what they've accomplished is in 2s or something. Everything's in 2s, right? Is that what that means? It means peace. I know it means peace. If you turn it around, it means something totally different. So you have to be very careful. I have enjoyed working with each of you, and I will miss seeing you. I am confident that you folks will continue to use the parenting methods that you learned in this group. Close. I think we are. Oops. Identifying career-long processes. Professionals should participate in self-evaluation and evaluation of clients by getting feedback from peers and supervisors. Strangely enough, when I applied, and I've done this a couple times in the last 5 years, but when I was applying to jobs, they wanted to see my evaluations. And that's why the evaluations are so important. I'm probably not going to be looking for another job since I'm so old. I'll probably just retire if I lose this job or get fired for one reason or another, or just quit. People piss me off too much. You don't piss me off. Students don't piss me off. It's the administration that gives me a hard time. Anyway, if something happens, of course, I'll probably just retire. But that's why evaluations are so important. So you need to be realistic about your evaluations. It can help. It can help your instructor. Practitioners pursue ongoing professional development through participating in personal counseling. And this is one of the interesting things about being a counselor. A lot of times if you are a counselor, one of the things that you need to do is you need to make sure that you haven't gone in the wrong direction, or that you're not dipping off the deep end. A lot of times what will happen is that you start taking on the problems of your clients, or you get too close to your clients. And if that happens, of course, then your sunny disposition suddenly turns a little bit gray. And you need to be careful that you're not burning out. So one of the things you need to do is seek professional counseling yourself. If you're going to be a counselor, you need at least a friend to talk about all this stuff. Okay? And this can be a problem, especially if you had a problem before you became a counselor. A lot of psychologists, a lot of social workers, a lot of counselors had a problem, and that's the reason they became a psychologist. I've already told you what my problem was. I couldn't figure out why my first wife left and how she could possibly abandon her children. This was back in the 70s, and that just wasn't happening. Women didn't do that. Women always got their kids. If there was any question as to if you were fighting over custody of the children, she could be a crackhead, except they didn't have crackheads back then. She could be a speed freak. She could be a heroin addict. She could be a prostitute, and she'd get custody of her children. So, this just didn't make any sense to me, since women, all mothers have this instinct for parenting. Just didn't make any sense to me that this lady left, and that's why I became a counselor. And eventually I figured it out. But of course I needed to deal with that before I could deal with anybody else's problems. Because if a woman came in who had allowed her children to go to her husband, I would have started seeing her in the same frame as in a film, as in the same frame as my wife and my first wife, my ex-wife. So I wouldn't have been dealing with her problem, I would have been dealing with my own problem. And that's not good. So you need to deal with all those things before you can become a counselor. Counseling, they will open up a counseling class and they will take in 50 people. Before the end of the first year, they will have lost half of them. Because those people have realized that their problems are too severe, that they can't help anybody else. And this is usually the way it works, strangely enough. Or, I mean, that's necessary. If somebody wants to become a teacher and they realize the only reason they want to be a teacher is because they're authoritarian and they want to boss around little kids, they don't really like little kids, they need to figure that out before they actually get into the program, or if they actually get through the program and start teaching children. And it's the same way with counseling. If you're doing this for your own ego's sake, then you're doing this for the wrong reason. And of course, you need to figure that out now. There's a lot of different directions you can go in psychology. You don't have to go into counseling. But most psychologists are counseling psychologists. That's the majority job that psychologists have. Reflecting on your own values and ethics in your work with diverse clients. And of course, this is something else that you need to think about. A lot of individuals only counsel people that look like them, act like them, and smell like them. We can talk about smell. If we look at all the counselors in the United States, most of them tend to be around cities. Why? Because there's so many crazy people in cities? No, that's not the reason why. It's because they want to live in cities and they don't want to live in a rural area. This is an underserved population. This is an underserved area. Arizona has more counselors than it needs, but almost all of them live in Flagstaff and Phoenix and Tucson. That's where they all live. Why? Because they're city people. They want to stay in the cities. And they want to deal with the people that are like them. They don't want to try to deal with people that aren't like them. So if you are a white counselor, then probably almost all your clients are going to be white. Now this is really kind of a tragedy because how many Native counselors are there out there? The answer is not enough. Obviously there's not enough. So this is a really serious problem up in Montana. And the reason that I was able to get a job in Montana to teach counseling up there is because they had one native counseling psychologist in the whole damn state. One. And she quit to teach. So then they had none, zero. And of course we were trying to, the people that understand a population the best are people from that population, obviously. I mean, that's only logical. So that's one of the reasons why we opened the psychology program at Fort Belknap College. And I was part of that, opening that thing up. Did we graduate any people that became counselors? No. Zero. Zilch. We had one that went into social work counseling, but not into psychology counseling. I know. So how many people do we have to see how many people do we have to teach before we find somebody that actually becomes a counselor? And the answer is, we don't know because, well, anyway. But they do have Masters in Social Work Counseling at Salish Kootenai College up on the Flathead Reservation. Do you have any idea where that is or who those people are? No idea whatsoever. Okay, anyway, they have a master's program. They also have a bachelor's program, so we were trying to funnel people into their bachelor's program. And we weren't doing very well. For a couple different reasons. One reason, what reasons do you think problems we had getting people from Fort Belknap to go up into the Flathead? What was the problem? All these people are American Indians. We had two tribes, they had two tribes. We had the Gros-Ventre and the Assiniboine. They had the Salish and the Kootenai, hence the name Salish Kootenai. Fort Belknap College has changed their name to the Aani Nakota College, which is the two tribes, which reflects the two tribes. So what do you think was the problem? Why in the world couldn't we send people up there? What was going on? We're talking about people from one tribe going to a school run by another tribe. What was the problem?
They have different cultures.
Different cultures?
Different cultures, yeah, the cultures were completely different. That's a problem. That can be a problem. What about leaving your reservation going anywhere else? Do people like to do that?
They have to.
He wants it to happen. Mom wants you to stay home. You know what happens up there when somebody dies? You go and it takes you 3 weeks to go to the funeral. Oh, geez, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I know. I'd have students that lost a grandparent, and my goodness, I wouldn't see them until finals time. They left at midterm. My goodness, they just disappeared. And a lot of times, what happened, it wasn't the fact that they didn't want to come back. It was the fact that their parents didn't want. They needed them, so they had to stay there. You know, cut wood, and feed the horses, and, you know, that kind of stuff. I know it's tough. So parents don't want their kids to leave. That was the problem there. And of course, I talked about this before. I don't know, maybe your parents are trying to kick you out. Probably not. I'm guessing that's not what's happening. They're trying to keep you around as well. But that was the biggest problem up there. The parents didn't want them to go, and that was a problem. And the other problem was that the Flathead is up in the mountains, and those are mountain people. These were plains people. Does that mean anything? Oh my God, they used to hate each other. They used to kill each other. They don't anymore, of course, I hope. Went to a ball tournament there. Man, I'll tell you what, we couldn't get a call to save our lives. They were, we were tagging people out this far in front of the plate. He's safe, slid under your tag. Wait a minute. Yeah. I played on Fort softball. Participating in lifelong learning to keep abreast of new ideas and resources. This is not the easiest thing in the world, but as long as you remember the APA, of course, you get 2 magazines. You get a magazine every month, and then you get and another magazine you get it every quarter. And it talks about all the new things that are going on in psychology and some of the new directions things are taking. Okay, where are we? What are we planning for a career-long professional development? Create a career development plan that might include practice skills and knowledge related to different types of climate challenges, different cultural groups, and of course we need to be aware that other cultural groups are different. We need to try to figure out who the hell these people are, okay? There are 2 different directions in psychology. One is called one deals with diversity, and the other deals with multiculturalism. Diversity teaches you that everybody's the same, but the reality is that everybody's not the same. All cultures are not the same. Just because you're 26 years old, you don't act like all other 26-year-olds in the United States. That's not the way it works. So you need to understand where they're coming from. When we're talking about cultures, we're not just talking about African American, Asian, Mexican, Colombian, Puerto Rican, Cuban. We're not just talking about that. We're also talking about where they are. So if somebody lives in Texas, are they the same as somebody who lives in Chicago? Or even though they're both white, even though they're both African American? No. So a region will have a culture as well. And this is something that you need to understand also. I was listening to something the other day. It's from Louisiana. And this guy came on, and he had an Eastern accent, and I'm thinking, this guy's from Louisiana, but he's got an Eastern accent. He doesn't have a Southern accent. You've ever heard the people from Louisiana have a real mushy way of speaking? I don't know. Anyway, I was expecting an accent. The guy had no accent whatsoever. But the thing I'm trying to explain is that you need to at least be aware that somebody who lives in New Orleans is going to have a certain cultural aspect to them, no matter whether they're black, white, or Hispanic, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So you need to also understand that regions have a culture, a separate culture as well. Does that make sense? People from Arizona, I was told this weekend, maybe it was one of you that told me that they said that Navajo that live in New Mexico are different from Navajo that live in Arizona. They have a different personality. I know. They have it's a different religious structure, and I didn't realize that. If they're non-traditional, they're more likely to be Baptist or something. I was just, really? Is that the way it is? The closer you get to Utah, the more likely that Mormon is part of the influence. I was talking to Marius. He grew up in a Mormon town, right outside of Phoenix. Well, it's not that, it's kind of way outside of Phoenix, but at least it's outside. But most of the white people living in the town are Mormon. So that's the culture that he grew up in. Really fascinating stuff. So you need to understand different cultural groups, and you need to understand regions. Let's take that one for as a reality. Different size systems. You may have 4 or 5 counselors. You may be in another organization has 50 counselors, and they will distribute their clients that way. Professional journals. You need to read professional journals. Continuing education. You need to try to maintain your licensure, and of course you'll have to go to continuing education to do that. Deciding whether it is specialized or not, and we can talk more about that later. Staying current with evidence-based practices. Keeping current with research is expected, of course, and it's your job to accept that research or reject that research. Just because somebody did the research doesn't mean that it's good research. Don't tell Sarah I said that. Not all research is good research. Some of it's done just so the guy can keep his job, so he had to do something. And here's the last one. I'm just sick of saying love goodbyes. Oh, I love these GIFs. They're good. Okay. As much information as you can accumulate. This is really important. It's your experiences, your knowledge base. If you think everybody's going to be the same, you're probably wrong. If you're dealing here on the reservation, if you think that everybody's exactly the same, you're going to be really surprised. The person that celebrates the 3 days of the Day of the Dead, this seems kind of against your taboos, my goodness gracious. And they dig it, some big body might dig in the ground, as odd as that may seem. It happens. They may be more like me than you think. Anyway, okay, there you go. That's chapter 15. So Wednesday we'll start counseling. You need to make sure that you have a character done by Wednesday. And I know that 4 of you, at least 4 of you, I can't remember. I've got 9, I think. But 4 of you in this room right now, I know you have characters. So at least 4 of you. And if you don't have a character, you can't counsel. So that's not going to work. So please turn in your, and I'm talking to the people in Videoland as well. If you haven't turned in your histories, give me something, because we need to we will start on Wednesday. I have finished with all my lectures. I will sit here and I will probably grade your papers or something. I don't know what I'll do. I'll probably do something. Anyway, and I may have to, if there's an odd number in the classroom, I will have to, I'll have to be a character as well. And good luck with my character. He is a drunk and fun.